friends, welcome back to my channel. We're here today for a Friday Reads video, which is really my November recap. So I'm going to tell you about the 13 books that I read in November. I'm going to try to be brief. I know I say this all the time that I want my videos to be shorter and then they go on for a long time. So without any long introduction, 13 books. These are the physical copies that I have. A lot of the books that I read in November, I read free copies from my library. I love New York Public Library. One of the best things that they did, and it didn't affect me that much, but one of the things that I think that they did was the best thing. One of the best things that they did this year, aside from just buying more books, is they lifted library fines. So anyone who had a fine, they cleared it. I had a fine that I was carrying just because I don't know why I had a fine, but they allow you to have up to, I think it was 10 and then they increased it to $15. You could owe up to $15 in fines and still check out books. But if you owed more than that, then you couldn't check out any materials until you had gone below that threshold. So over the years, I've racked up fines because that's just what we do, right? So I had maybe about $7 in fines, and I could have paid it. I could have just gone online and paid it at some point, but it was there. But all of that was forgiven. I think it was in October, sometime a few weeks ago. They lifted all the fines so that anyone who wants to borrow books with a library card, all is forgiven and you can do that. So that was one of the really fantastic things that happened. So it didn't affect me that much, but I love the fact that more people can get books. So that was wonderful. Another highlight of my recent reading life is, I'm going to talk about the book later, but one of the books that I read and reviewed here on the channel in November, the author, the judge, Her Honor, saw my review. She saw my video on YouTube and she contacted me. She said she loved it. She shared the review with other people and she wanted to send me a signed copy of the book. So I had gotten an ARC from the publisher, and then Her Honor, Judge Ladoris Hazard Cordell, signed this book with a little note and sent it to me. She also sent me a gift. She also sent me a gift, but I don't know where it is because my daughter has. She also sent me a gift. I love it. A mask with filters. So that was wonderful. So those are some of the highlights of my recent reading life. One of the highlights of December already. I'm doing Vlogmas. So if you haven't already checked out my Vlogmas videos, we're doing a list challenge, a list video every day. A book list, so check those out. So yeah, those are highlights from my recent reading life, but we're here to talk about the books that I read in November. So my November TBR was ambitious, as it always is. I had a goal to review all the books that I read. I'm still working on that. The reviews are still coming, but so far I've only published maybe about 6 of those reviews, so I have some videos to make. But I published some of the most important ones. So one of the first books that I read was for the Run Right Reads book club. I read The Lesson by Cadwell Turnbull. It was one of the books that we were reading from the US Virgin Islands in October. Didn't get to it in October, so I finished it in November and I loved it. I'll post my review video down below if you want to go check that out. It was kind of sci-fi, but the author didn't spend a lot of time on world building because the focus was on showing how science fiction could actually just invade how science fiction could just invade our lives as we know it, and everything could just turn topsy-turvy. So it was a lot of realistic science fiction set in the not too distant future, like the early 2020, late 2020s. Yeah, set in the late 2020s, and about what happens when these alien people come to the US Virgin Islands and are granted some kind of immunity. They could do anything that they want and there's no consequence because the things that they're offering to people, like cures for diseases that have plagued humanity, the government, the administration, the people themselves are willing to look the other way in some cases when violence happens. So read that, loved it, reviewed it. Check out my review. I'll link that down below. The next book that I read and reviewed was Her Honor Judge Ladoris Hazard Cradell, one of the first African American judges, the first female black judge in the Superior Court in California. And she talks in her book, this is a memoir of her time as a judge, and she talks about her interpretation of the law. Some of the things that motivate her or motivated her interpretation, and when she finally decided to stop being a judge, how she continued working working to reform the judicial system. And I love this. I love what I learned from her by reading her words, learning a little bit more about the legal system in this country and how sometimes justice can be skewed based on where you live, because state laws are very different, and how sometimes things evolve because new legislation is being passed by the Supreme Court that could impact cases that are pending right now, and how sometimes the judges can reevaluate things based on those developments. Love this book, highly recommend it. You're going to hear me talk a little bit more about it, of course, when my best of the year list come up. Another book that I read, what's the next book? Oh, the next book that I finished was Land of Love and Drowning by Tiffany Unique. The other book for the October selection from the U.S. Virgin Islands for the Run Right Reads book club, and love that one as well. Loved a lot of things about that book. Let me be clear. There are some things about it that were a little off-putting, and I talked about that in my review video, which I'll link down below as well. And this was about family and how the women in the family, how their reality changes based on the events that happen to the men in their lives. And so we read about this family who has high status in the country because of the woman's heritage, but their social standing is affected by the decisions that the husband makes. And so when the husband dies and he leaves the woman a widow and the two daughters fatherless, how they become victims of their circumstances, and how the woman, the wife, the widow, how her life just completely turns around when her husband is no longer there, even though she was the one who had the social standing. And it traces the evolution of that family, what happens in these young girls' lives as they grow up and try to have relationships with other people, how their appearance marks the interactions that they have. And there's a lot of discussion about religion and how people interpret religion, and some of the themes from the Bible are impressed upon these people, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful integration of a lot of those themes. But again, there's some things in there that you might not like, so go check out my review. I'll link that down below as well. Land of Love and Drowning by Tiffany Unique. And then one of the best books that I've read ever, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honoré Fannin Jeffers. This was 700 pages of 800, almost 800 pages of family saga. And we are reading about the evolution of Black life in the last 200 years or so, through this family's lineage. And we're tracing the life of this family through the women, but also seeing their relationship with these very strong characters, these strong male characters, how these women's lives are interrupted by things that happen, and how they rise above, how they sacrifice and compromise and grow. And it's a song of love to Black life. It's a song of love to survival. And oh man, this book is so wonderful, so rich, so deep, so great. I reviewed that, so I'll link that down below as well. Go check out my review if you want to hear me gush a little bit more about the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honoré Fannin Jeffers. And again, loved it. Loved it. Aside from that, I read The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. That was one of the book club picks for the Book Naturalist book club. run by Heidi and Doris. I've been hoping to participate all year. This was my first time reading, and this was the first time that they read a novel. And it was about indigenous people, indigenous life, and seeds. What seeds are, what seeds do, how they feed us now, but how they feed us in the future, and how women are the caretakers for seeds because they have to partition how much they're going to use now and how much you're going to save to plant when the conditions are favorable. And the novel uses that metaphor of seeds and shows how people can be seeds, how people in families are seeds, how they are the receptacles for their traditions, the traditions of their people, and the identity of their family, how there may be times where they're dormant, where they're living in places and relationships where they can't really express their identity, but they preserve it inside and go on to be developed and to grow, to be cultivated and to grow and to have a harvest later. And I love that. I love how she explored seeds with the characters. The characters themselves are kind of, it's not that they're flat. The characters are, they're kind of removed. There's a little bit of a distance between us and the characters as we're reading them, and we see how they have kind of held themselves back. But you know that that is purposeful, and it's just such a wonderful read. Again, review that one, link down below if you want to hear more about The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. And of course, Heidi has published her review. I'm not sure if Doris has already reviewed it, but I know other people who've read the book will probably be reviewing it soon. We got to speed this up. I read Langston Hughes' Tambourines to Glory. This was his second novella, I think. And this was about two women who were living in a rooming house in Harlem. And they are down on their luck when they decide to start a church. And they decide to start the church for mercenary reasons. They know that there is money in the religion industry, if you want to call it that. And so they decide to start a church. But one of them becomes converted in the process, and the other one is playing. And it's about the rise and fall of their fortune linked to this church, and it is wonderful. I'm going to be publishing a review video. I'm going to make a review video very soon, so you'll hear me talk a little bit more about this. I buddy read this with Rosalie and Columbus, and one of the things that we talked about was how you don't necessarily have to be converted yourself in order to be a conduit for other people, and that's a really interesting topic to pursue in a discussion about religion. So more on that in my review coming up. I read Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. I read a hardcover copy at my in-laws' house. I just sat in the couch in the reading room and read this book, and it was wonderful. It's poetry with illustrations, like pen drawings illustrating the poems. And it is just such a profound look at life through a comic perspective, with humor, with wordplay, and it's clever, it's poetic, so it seems like it's written for children, but the themes are just so engaging and so mature. So it's, it's great. I wanted to read this book. I've heard about this book many times, and I've wanted to read it, and I'm really happy that I did. Now I really want to copy for myself, so you may hear me talk a little bit more about that sometime soon. I'm not sure that I'll make a review video just because I don't have the book. I'd like to revisit the poems before I make a video, so we'll see. Aside from that, though, I read two books for the Run Right Reads book club November selection, and in November we were reading Antigua and Barbuda. The first book was a YA novel called Musical Youth by Joanna C. Hillhouse, and this is about a girl. Her parents are absent from her life, is what I want to say. Her mother died and her father is absent. She doesn't know where for a long time, and she's been raised by her grandmother, and she has these dreams. She doesn't know where she gets some of her dreams from, but she finds this guitar in her house and she is really good at playing. And so over the course of a summer, she starts to play and gets involved with a drama club, and all the events that surround that mean that she gets to develop she develops in lots of ways. So she develops in her musical talent, but she also develops in her maturity and her eye on the world. And so she has this project where she's supposed to be learning about colorism in the island, and colorism in their community, how people's views of other people are skewed by what people look like, whether they're darker skin or lighter skin, they're all black, but who the fair complexion people are and whether they have favor. And so the book is exploring that, and it was wonderful. It's YA, so it's not written for a completely literary adult audience, but the themes will resonate with everyone. So I'm going to be discussing this in a review video coming up soon. I'll explore that a little bit more. So for now, I'll just say that I read it, loved it. I read Redefining Realness by Janet Mock. Janet Mock is known as being a trans woman. She's also of Native Hawaiian background. Her mother is a Native Hawaiian Islander. Her father is African American. And so I read the book because, number one, there's just been a lot of violence against trans people historically, but also lately. And I feel like some of that may be quelled if we all seek to educate ourselves a little bit more about trans identity. And so this was me for taking my first step towards that. So I reviewed the book. I read it, loved it, reviewed it. It's an intense read about Janet Mock's journey from knowing as a young child that she was feminine, but knowing that she was born biologically a boy, and the process of exploring that and trying to change it, how those thoughts were received by other people in her community, her parents, her siblings, her friends, her school. And she talks about her journey, not necessarily the journey of every trans person, because she's careful to note that some of the successes that she has were based on, number one, the alliances that she was able to make, both with peers and people who became her protector, but also that she always knew that her family supported her and held her up. And so she didn't feel isolated like a lot of trans people do. And so the book is intense. She explores some really harsh things that have happened to her, but she also talks about the things that didn't happen to her. And so it's a really great read. I reviewed it. I'll link that down below as well if you want to go check out that video. And we're almost done. I read online a short story collection called Beginners by Raymond Carver. It was the manuscript that he originally submitted that once it was edited, became known, was published under the title What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. Review is coming soon, but for now, I'm going to say it's a short story collection, and the entries are themselves short enough that some of these stories might not stay with you if you're looking for stories that will stick. Short stories don't often do that, but the character study that Carver achieves in his writing, I feel like you will remember these characters when you read the book. You'll remember the characters even if you don't remember what happens afterwards, because some of the stories feel like they don't necessarily end in a resolution. We are seeing what happens with these characters as they go through a significant event in their lives, but it's really the characters that we are watching, not so much the things that are happening. This book is brilliant. The character study is just fascinating. Like, it's hard to turn away from these characters. The book is dated. I can't remember when it was published. It was a long time ago. And Raymond Carver is a white man living in the middle of America, I think. So if you're looking for cultural sensitivity and timelessness, you're probably not going to find it in these books. Like, there are places where he refers to Black people as Negroes, and it seems like there are stereotypical things that happen to Black people because, like, the orderlies who work in a hospital are Black, or the family who's waiting on a loved one who's been injured in a fight, a random act of violence. They're black. But regardless of who the characters are in these stories, there's a lot that's happening as we see how they are being affected by things, and we see them. We get a glimpse into their psyche and their development, how things affect them, and it's just it's brilliant. So I'm going to be reviewing that soon. I know I've said that a million times. Then I read Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid, which was the other, finally pick up a book. This was the other selection for the Run Right Reads book club. This is a short book, only about 150 pages of living in this young girl's head. She's Antigua and she's growing up, and she's at first idolizing her mother. And as she's growing up, she starts to pull away from her mother. As she's maturing, and if she realizes that her mother is pulling away from her, like they're establishing separate identities. And it's as though this girl is saying, I can't exist aside from my mother unless I hate her. So this is her trying to hate her mother, psyching herself up for establishing distance. And so I have a daughter. My daughter is 2, and we're coming from a place where she lived inside of me, and as she's growing and she's establishing that she's a person and she can do things independently, I relate to this book so much because I'm a mother, but I'm also a daughter. I'm a daughter who grew up very close to her mother, and so I'm gonna talk a lot more about this book when I do a review. But if you haven't yet read Annie John, Jamaica Kincaid, if you haven't yet read any Jamaica Kincaid, read something that she's written. She's amazing. She's amazing. So yeah, Annie John. More on that coming soon. Last 2 books that I read were for Nonfiction November. Oh, finally, I picked up something. Well, the first couple, no, Her Honor was also Nonfiction November. What else did I read? And Redefining Realness. Yeah, I read 4 books for Nonfiction November. So this was book number 3, Lost Cities, Ancient Tombs. This is 100 Discoveries That Changed the World, published by National Geographic. So the editor of this, author-editor, is Anne R. Williams. Anne R. Williams curated these 100 entries, archaeological finds, and how archaeology has changed over the last... how archaeology has evolved. Because we're looking at findings from long ago to recent, and how archaeologists are collaborating more with other scientists, and how other scientific developments are being used to assist excavations, but also to figure out where to look for. And so, in this book, we go through some of the signs, but we also look at some of the discoveries, and they're fascinating. If you have a thirst for knowing more about the world and how the world that we know has been changing, highly recommend this book. I try to keep it in really good condition because I might want to pass it on, but I'm also thinking that I want to keep it. The last book, a review is coming soon. The last book was The Unlikely History of Radium, Half-Lives, by Lucy Jane Santos. I love that this book is written by a woman. She is a scientist. She's the proud owner of a formidable collection of radium beauty treatments. So in this book, she's talking about the history of radium, how radium was discovered, some of the thoughts and preconceptions about radium, and how our understanding of it has changed, how we use it, how we've become more comfortable with it, and what are some of the things that we do and we shouldn't do, and what are some of the misconceptions and how those can be resolved. I'm going to be reviewing this one as well, of course. This was a gift from the publishers. Both of these were gifts from publishers. This is National Geographic. This one was Pegasus Books. And so I'm going to be talking a lot more about those in individual videos coming soon. So yeah, those are the 13 books that I read in November. So 4 books for Nonfiction November, another 4 for the Run Right Reads book club, and some things that I read just because I wanted to read them. So I had a wonderful reading month, and I'm looking forward to another wonderful reading month. In December, I published my TBR, and I'm trying to stick to it because I have a lot of books that I just want to read them before the end of the year. So would love to chat with you in the comments down below. Let me know the best book that you read in November. I have two, one nonfiction, one fiction. The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, hands down, and Her Honor. Um, Two of my best books of the year, and they were written by Black women, and I love it. So, would love to chat with you in the comments down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. I know it was longer than we expected, but I think we had a good time. So I hope you'll come back for my next videos. Chat soon. Until then, bye. Happy reading.